Hello, my name is Abdulmati Asiri and I'd like to welcome you in another Boeing 737 video tutorial. In this video, I'd like to talk about the Descend Forcast page in the CDU, which you can get to by going to the Descend here and then Forecast. There are three main reasons why you might want to use this page. The first one is, are you planning or are you expecting to turn the engine anti-ice on for the descent? The second is, how's the atmospheric condition for the descent compared to standard and the landing airport as well? And last but not least, actually this is the most important section of the page in my opinion, which is, do you have a strong tailwind or not? So let's look at the page. Here you have the transition level. The default value is flight level 180, but this number will change if the transition level for the area that you are flying in is different from flight level 180. And the change will happen depending on the FMC version that you have. If you have an old version of the FMC, then this number will change to that specific area transition level when you load the approach or a star. For the newer versions, once the FMC have the destination airport, the number here will change to that specific area transition level, provided of course it is different from flight level 180. Next, we have here the thermal anti-ice on and off. This is the engine anti-ice. When are you expecting to turn the engine anti-ice on, and when are you expecting to turn it off? And the keyword here is expecting. Remember, this is just a forecast, so you don't have to be accurate. You don't have to say, oh, I'm gonna turn it on at 365 and I'll turn it off at 11,500 or so. Just be rough. I'm expecting to turn it on, let's say, at top of descent. So I'm gonna put here 370. And I'm expecting to turn it off at 10,000. So I'll put 100. And that's it. Now, why do you need to give, or why does the FMC needs this information as far as the engine anti-ice? Remember, the whole descent planning done by the FMC is to do an idle thrust descent. And if you have the engine anti-ice on, the EEC will use a different idle setting for the engines. That's going to be higher than if the engine anti-ice is off. That is, of course, what's called an approach idle. As you know, for normal flight, or most of the flight phases, we are using, or the AEC is using, flight idle. But there is also approach idle, and one of the triggers for approach idle is the engine anti-ice. And as you know, also we have a ground idle, which is on the ground. Now I'm going to show you a clip to demonstrate for you this increase in the thrust. So basically here we are already on an idle thrust descent. So this is flight idle, 37% N1 or so. And shortly you'll see TAI in green here annotated, indicating that the engine anti-ice for the engine has been switched on. And you'll see the about a 3% increase here in N1. So what we are doing with that entry in the CDU is giving the FMC a heads up for this increase in thrust to be factored for the descent profile construction. Alright, so now we have the TAI, as you can see, and now we'll have it shortly for the right engine as well. And as you can see, N1 went up to 40%. There is no movement, no physical movement for the thrust levers. It's just an EEC adjustment for the engine thrust. And now we'll turn it off and you'll see the thrust go back to 36% or 37%. We'll see it decrease now. Okay, so the engine anti-ice is off and the idle is going back to 36% N1. A tip, a personal technique, whatever you want to call it. Me personally, do I worry about putting this information here if I'm expecting to descend in a small portion of the descent? For example, let's say that I'm expecting icing condition from 370 to 320. That's 5,000 feet. Would I put it here? No. Because remember, the increase in the thrust was about 3%. So unless I'm expecting to most of the descent to be in icing condition and the engine anti-ice is on, I'll put it, otherwise I'll leave it. And remember, this is just a forecast, and in DEFCON they are saying expecting to turn it on and expecting to turn it off. Next here we have the cabin rate. This number is advisory only. You don't have any manual entries here. And in the FMC users guide, it says that you can utilize this number if you are doing a manual pressurization control in the descent. To be honest with you, I don't know how is that possible, but if I learn that information, I'll share it as a follow-up video in the future. So for now, it's just an advisory. Anytime you change anything here, this number will change as well, but you don't have any manual control over it. Next here we have the ISA deviation and QNH, and this is the atmospheric condition. The ISA deviation here is the average ISA deviation for the descent. So this number might be very hard to come up with unless it's provided by your company. What most pilots do, myself included, is to figure the ISA deviation for the airport itself. So it is not 100% in alignment with the FCOM, but again, it's just an estimation, and the whole thing here is just an approximation. So what is ISA deviation anyways? The deviation is the temperature if the actual temperature is different from a standard atmosphere. For an airport at sea level, the standard temperature is 15 degrees Celsius. So anything different from that is the deviation. So let's say that I'm landing an airport at sea level and the reported temperature is 20 degrees. Again, the standard is 15, so we'll go 20 minus 15 is 5 degrees, and that's going to be my ISA deviation. So I can go 5 slash, and I put it here. Let's say that I'm landing at an airport that is 1,000 feet above sea level. Now, as you know, the standard temperature for that airport is going to be 13, because remember, the standard decrease in the standard temperature is 2 degrees Celsius per 1,000 feet. So if the airport is 1,000 feet above sea level, you'll decrease by 2 degrees. So the standard temperature for that airport is 13 degrees. Let's say the airport is 2,000 feet above sea level. Then the standard temperature for that airport is going to be 15 minus 6 degrees. All right, so let's go back to the example. Let's say that I'm landing at an airport that is 1,000 feet above sea level. Okay. And the reported temperature for that airport was 20 degrees Celsius. So we'll go 20 minus 13, we'll end up with 7, and that's going to be our ISA deviation for that airport at that time. Personal technique again, personal preference. Would I put it here if it is 7, 5, 3 degrees difference? No. Personally, I'll start putting the numbers here if the temperature is 15 degrees difference or more. So if the deviation is 15 degrees or more, I start putting it less than 15 degrees. Usually I don't. And remember here, for this temperature and pressure here, you can put either or both. So be smart, be efficient about the information that you enter, and just utilize it in a way that it will have an impact or an effect on the descent profile. But again, if it is close to standard, why bother? So that's the ISA deviation. QNH. Out of everything here, this is, I think, the easiest one to enter because it's straightforward. It is whatever reported QNH for the airport you are landing in is you put here. Now remember, the standard pressure for an airport at sea level is 1013. So if the reported QNH is 1015, should you put it? Will you put it? You can, absolutely you can. Personally, I wouldn't. Again, it's very close to standard, so I wouldn't bother doing these clicks and putting it. When do I put it? If the difference is big from standard. Let's say if the reported QNH was 1020, then definitely I will put it. Or on the other hand, if it is very low, like 100, let's say 1005, then definitely I'll put it again. The next section, and this is, in my opinion, the most important section in the page, which is the wind. You have 3 altitudes for the winds and direction and speed for each altitude you can enter. I start worrying about this section if I have a strong tailwind. A strong tailwind for me is 40 knots tailwind or more. And for this flight now, for this example, we have about 100 knots tailwind, so we need to utilize this page. What I see many pilots, the first entry, they use the cruise level. So we are cruising at 370, they'll go 370 here. And then they'll put the wind speed and direction that they have at 370. So we'll go 275 at 110. If you do it that way, believe it or not, the FMC will not utilize this information. Why? Because it's already have an access to a real-time data. It's already having the access to this information. So the FMC will not use this entry. So we are just doing 10 clicks, I think, in my opinion, for no reason. And in the FMC Users Guide, it says that the FMC will not utilize the information within 2,000 feet of its altitude. So even if I put this number at 36 or 35, the same thing. The FMC will drop it and use the real-time data. I move the winds 10,000 below. So if I'm 370, I'll go 270. This is the first entry. And I'll utilize the same winds that I have at 370. So what I'm doing, the only thing, I'm just moving the wind from 370 to 10,000 below. Next entry, I'm gonna go 10,000 below again, so I'll go 170. And almost I'll use the half wind speed that I have here. So I'll go 275 at, let's say, 60. Now remember again, this doesn't have to be accurate, doesn't have to be exactly done this way. The whole page is just a forecast, okay? The third line, I'll move either 10,000 or 8,000. Usually I like to use 10,000 as my last line here. So 10,000 feet, and I reduce the wind by half again. So this is what I do. Would I do it for any altitude? No. If I'm low, relatively low, for example, if I'm cruising at 230, would I utilize the 3 lines? No, definitely not. I'll use just 2 lines. So the first entry is going to be 13,000, second entry 8,000 or so, and also I'll use the same technique, moving the winds 10,000 below and then half of the wind. The third line is going to be just empty because we are already close to the ground. It's not very high. But if I'm flying at an high altitude like this, then definitely I'll use the 3 lines. And another factor is how strong is the tailwind. If it is like this, 110, 120, 130, definitely I'll use the 3 lines. Let's say if it was just 40 knots at 370, I might just use 2 lines, and so on. So play with it or try it and see what works for you. Now, will this end up in the airplane being on the proper idle thrust descent? Maybe. But in all cases, it's going to be close to that idle thrust descent profile. You might need to use the speed brake. You might need to have, or the thrust levers might come up of their idle position. It's not a big deal, but you are at least within an acceptable difference that you can correct for it. The other side, if you don't put anything here and you have a strong tailwind like this, then you might end up in a situation that you'll not be able to capture the glide path even with the speed brake. So 40 knots or more, I suggest you start considering using the wind forecast section here in the descent forecast page. And I'm talking about a 40 knots tailwind, okay, 40 knots tailwind component. If you have a crosswind, you don't have to worry about it. Even if I was having 110 knots, but just as a crosswind, I wouldn't put anything here. If you have a headwind, I usually utilize the same technique even with the headwind, but it is not so critical for the headwind as it is for the tailwind. Because with the tailwind, the only thing that you have is the speed brake to correct. But if you have headwind, thrust levers might come out of their idle position, which is not a big deal. Now, the last and most important point for the video, which I see many pilots do it many times, So before that, when should you utilize this page, the Descend Forecast? When you do the approach preparation. So when you are doing the setup for the flaps 30 speed, briefing the approach, go ahead here to this page, see how's the atmospheric condition for the airport. Are you expecting to use the engine anti-ice for the descent? Do you have a strong headwind? Do you have a strong tailwind? Do you want to put it? That is the best time to utilize this page. But if the airplane is already on a descent like this now, so let's say that we started the descent, and shortly we'll have the drag required message because the airplane is not or cannot maintain the glide path. And I said to myself, you know what, I forgot to put the descent forecast wind, and I have a strong tailwind. So let me go ahead and do it now. Let's go with 1 in 3, fly level 300, and we'll use the same one, 270 at 109. Alright, so before I execute, see the deviation here. So far we are slightly now below the profile, but the profile is getting away from us, or eventually it will. Yes, it is moving away now. Now look, if when I do an execute, see the difference. Okay, so executing, it went up to 5,000, and the airplane is not as dramatic as what happened here in PMDG, but it has the same effect. If the airplane is already descending, forget about the descent forecast page, especially the wind section here, especially if you have a strong tailwind. Just forget about it. Deal with the situation using the speed brake, because you will increase the workload on yourself for nothing. I don't want to see the airplane 5,000 feet above my idle or my descent profile, especially with this wind. Definitely in a situation like this, I'll be requesting some delay vectors to lose altitude. Now let me show you a clip in the airplane to see the effect as well in the airplane. Okay, so here we have about 80 knots tailwind, and the pilot flying is entering the information. We are already on a descent. As you see, the vertical deviation indicator is active, but we are not away from the profile in a way that we cannot correct for. I mean, with the speed brake, with this wind, there's no problem, we can maintain it. But look now, as the pilot entering the third entry here for the wind, and as soon as he executes, just keep an eye on the vertical deviation indicator. So we are slightly above the profile now, right? But as soon as he just executed, see the change in the vertical deviation indicator. It went to about more than 2,000 feet. So we were very close to it, and we know that we might be slightly above it, but it's not a big deal. But now it is a huge deal for us. We are 2,000 feet above the profile. Even with the speed brake, you might find it hard for you to correct for a profile like this. So remember, if you don't do the descent forecast page before the top of descent, at least by 20 miles, forget about it. This is my suggestion to you. After all, it's called a descent forecast page. So if you don't do the forecast before, it's not a forecast anymore. And just to understand what's going on with the FMC, or how does the FMC do this computation. If you don't have anything in this page and you have a strong tailwind like this, the FMC will say, at fly level 370, I have this wind. But at sea level, or at touchdown, wind is calm. And it will do a linear computation, decreasing the wind from this at 370 to 00 at touchdown. And what we do by moving the winds 10,000 and doing these 3 entries is interrupting that computation of the FMC and forcing it to do a more conservative descent profile. So this is my technique for using it. As I said, I've been utilizing it for many years and it's been working great. Not necessarily to get the airplane right on the correct glide path or correct descent profile path, but very close to it. With that said, I hope that this video would be of some benefit to you. As always, please share any information you have Any questions, comments, or concerns are highly appreciated. And until next time, this is Abdul Mutay Assiri. Wish you a safe flying and smooth landing. Thank you for watching.